Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is OmniMan86, and today we are going to be taking a look at my collection of Daredevil Omnibus, Omnibuses, however you want to refer to it, Omnis, and the custom dust jacket collection that I have for them. So stay tuned and come back and check it out. All right, so let's take a look at these. All of the dust jackets that I have for these come from a good guy named Roy. If you are active over on the Omnibus subreddit, then you've probably seen him on there. He reposts a lot of great videos and posts his own custom dust jacket collection, and so he did all of these, which are really fantastic. And so I'm going to talk about a couple things first. To get the elephant in the room out of the way, yes, you can see that these are not very even. So we've got a few different heights through here. So while I'm going to be talking mainly about the collection itself and the artwork that I chose, I do want to talk a little bit about the process for getting this done. Not too deeply, because you can go back and watch another video, which I will link here, so you can go check out what the actual process of going through getting these printed looks like. But you can see I've got some that are definitely shorter than others. This Marvel Knights Omnibus here by Joe Quesada, that one's probably the shortest one. You can even see some of the actual book itself sticking out of that one. Then the Shadowlands, it's also a little bit shorter. You can see that there as well. And then some of these are just way too tall. The Frank Miller Omnibus, those two there, those are way too tall. Those were actually printed by a different printer than the rest of these. I think that was one of the issues that I had, because they were by far the tallest out of all of these. So at some point, I will probably get those reprinted. I've got a couple other ones that I might get reprinted. And then some of them I can probably fix just by trimming a little bit off the top or the bottom. It's not huge differences, but just a little bit of work goes pretty far. So these are just some of the things you have to look out for. Just make sure your process is consistent throughout your printing and however you're creating your files, and then make sure your printer prints things the same way every time. I have had some that I've made the exact same way, and then I've gotten them back from the printer, and there's been something definitely off about them. So some of those I will probably be able to adjust a little bit to even those up. But I wanted to go ahead and just give a shout out to these for now. So here's a look at our first omnibus, and this is Daredevil Volume 1. This is the Origin and Silver Age version of Daredevil. So you can see here for this custom dust jacket, I chose the Daredevil issue number 1, which is available in the standard printing if you aren't getting the Alex Ross variant. And I'll kind of show those other covers over to the side. But the big difference with this one is that this does have the updated spine that you see Marvel using for a lot of its Silver Age comics. And that's with the small font here, the creators down here, and then the spine logo down here. They have not done a printing of this omnibus with this type of cover at this point. It's gotten the large font over on the side, which I can show you over here. But everything else is pretty much the same. And then the back, you can see it's got the cover collage on the back like you typically see on these Marvel Omnis that show all the issues it collects, which for this one collects Daredevil 1 through 41, Annual number 1, and the Fantastic Four number 73. And so I've never read any of this Daredevil before. I've pretty much read his modern era, if you will, starting with Frank Miller. But I love Daredevil. He's my favorite character. So even if I don't care for the stories from the Silver Age, which sometimes is kind of hit or miss with Marvel, at least I will own it, which is, what's a really great deal. So this is a fairly thick Omni. Obviously, with this original printing, sometimes they are a little bit thicker than the other ones. But if you can find it, which you can find a few copies out there that aren't crazy overpriced, you can get it below cover price, which is nice, but you're probably not going to find it as cheap as you'll find some other things on like in-stock trades and cheap graphic novels and things like that. So just be willing to pay a little bit more for it. But especially if you've not picked this up yet and you are planning on grabbing Volume 2 here when it comes out soon, you may want to pick this up, because I imagine it will only become harder to find as number 2 comes out and people are looking to grab Volume 1 as well. Next up are the two Frank Miller Omnis featuring Daredevil. And you can see for this first one, this is the cover that you can get on the new edition that just came out. This is the Epic issue of 181 featuring Bullseye versus Elektra. You can see it being teased there, and this cover has been riffed on quite a lot throughout history, and so you can find even like Batman comics and things like that that feature an homage to this cover. And so I like trying to keep the cover with the era that it's in. Sometimes I'm not a big fan of having like super updated modern covers with an older story. Granted, this isn't super old, but I mean, I guess at this point it's, 30 years old or older. But the one thing that you'll see that is different about this one is that this does have a typical Marvel omnibus spine. If you are familiar with these, which again, I'll show the covers, that they typically come with, that this is an Omni that Marvel did a different cover for. I don't know exactly why they decided to do that, but they even kept it consistent with the newest printing that just came out of this, that came out in January, does have the different spine for it. And so if you are putting it up on a shelf with other things, you might want a different spine like this, so that way it blends in nicely with the rest of your Omnis. And then obviously for me, I did this so it blends in well with the rest of my Daredevil Omnis. So you can see here, we've got the Daredevil logo. This is the modern logo you're going to see across all the Omnis that I have. Frank Miller and Klaus Janson, and it just says Omnibus down here. And then on the back, we have the collage of covers that include all of the issues that we see here. And so this collects a lot of different things throughout Daredevil history, in all of the Frank Miller run, or at least his initial run. And so we have Daredevil 150 to 162, and 163 and through 191, and then What If number 28. And you'll see, Roy does a really great job with these covers. He keeps the spot or the UPC intact. The ISBN and all that kind of stuff is on here, and typically does a really nice job of recreating all of this throughout the line. And as I mentioned, this has been reprinted very recently in January, so if you've never got this before, now is a great time to pick this up before it goes out of print. This has had 4 printings. It just had its 4th printing. Most of the covers, typically, there's been one standard cover, except for the original printing, which had 2 covers. And I believe the original printing maybe did have this Marvel design, but every printing since then has had the updated spine design on that. And then we have the Frank Miller Companion Omnibus. This one is technically out of print. You can find it out there. You're going to pay a little bit more for it. Maybe not quite cover price or right around cover price. But again, definitely not as cheap as you can find some other things, including the newest printing of the regular Omni. But here, this is a variant that's not been available on these dust jackets, but I really like this image of Daredevil kind of coming out of the flames here. You'll see on the side, we've got the spine a little bit thinner than the other one. And then we have a lot of the creators on the side here. So we've got Frank Miller, Mazzucchelli, Romita Jr., and Sienkiewicz. I think it's interesting that he chose to put Frank Miller on the side, so first and last name, and then the rest of them are just last names. But I think it flows well, and it looks nice on the spine, because if you had Miller, it's just been a lot smaller. So, and also Frank is the writer. I say Frank like I know this guy. I have no idea. So he's the writer on all of this, so it makes sense. And then he has Companion down here to be able to delineate between those two, and I like it's got the little image of Daredevil in the flames there. And then again, on the back, we have the cover collage, a little bit different here since we're getting a little bit into a more modern era. And so we've got a lot of different things through here. And we have this image of the Kingpin from John Romita Jr., which is great. You'll see the image to this issue here. This was available previously as a variant, and so you can find that. But again, I just really like this image here. And for an Omni, very nice and clean. There's not a whole lot going on. It's really just kind of that image and then the Daredevil logo down at the bottom. And that is pretty much it. But again, these look really nice on the side. The only other thing that I will say about these is that I did have a different printer do these. You can go check out my other video where I talk a lot about that. So the material on this is slightly different than the other ones. It's a little shinier, a little grippier. So if you are seeing these up on the shelf, you might notice that. And these are also cut a little bit big. The printer who did this printed these a little bit larger than I would have liked. So at some point, I will probably reprint these to get them to match the other ones. But that is a problem for future me. Next up, we have an Omni that technically isn't a Daredevil Omni. It is Marvel Knights by Joe Quesada. And the reason this is included, if you've ever read this or are familiar with the story, is that all the stories do contain Daredevil. And it includes the Daredevil title in here. And so there are a couple that kind of exist outside, so I'm not quite sure why they didn't decide to just call it a Daredevil Omni. Maybe once it gets reprinted one day, they will change the title of it. But again, this is another reason why I decided to go with a custom dust jacket for this one. And so you can see here that we've added the Daredevil Marvel Knights logo, and then on the side we've got the same spine design as the other ones. And then down here, instead of Omni or Companion, it says Marvel Knights to help delineate that. You can see the creators here. Joe Quesada, obviously being the main artist on all of these. We have Kevin Smith. This has the seminal Kevin Smith run from the Marvel Knights era, which is why it's titled that. David Mack has some stories in here, along with Jimmy Palmiotti. And there are a few other creators in here as well, but those are the main ones on the book. You can see on the back we start to get into more of a modern design here. We've still got a collage, but it's arranged a little more tightly than we see on the other ones. And then some highlights here with this Daredevil Father issue there. And so this collects Daredevil 0 through 15 and 1/2 from the 1998 series, Daredevil Father number 1 through 6, Marvel Authentic Daredevil number 1, and material from Marvel Knights Double Shot number 1. You're also going to see some issues in here by Garth Ennis, Rob Hayes, Dave Ross, Danny Mickey, Richard Eisenoff, and more. So there's a lot of creators working on this book, but obviously, as you can see Joe Quesada's influence through all the images up here, because he, again, was the worker on all that. That's really cool. David Mack cover there. And it's some really great stories in here. Again, this kind of flows right out of the Frank Miller era. This, kind of picks up a little bit later than some of Frank's earlier work, but some of the later stuff does flow very nicely into this. And so this is a nice addition. You will notice on this one that this one got cut a little bit short, either printed short or cut short, so you can see a little bit of the actual book itself kind of sticking up there. So again, this is another one I will probably get reprinted one day, just because it's the shortest of all of them. So something to look out for if you are doing your own Omni dust jackets. But this one has only ever had one printing, and up until recently you could find it readily available. It is starting to become harder to find. You might be able to find it on eBay or somewhere like that, but it is out of stock, I think, at pretty much all of the major retailers out there. So if you do come across it and you don't have it yet, you probably want to go ahead and pick it up if you are a Daredevil fan. And next we have Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis, volumes 1 and 2. Again, going with some very different covers on here than what are available on the standard issues. And so here we've got an image by David Mack, and then over there a cover by Greg Land. I really like kind of the way this stands out. This was kind of featured on my shelf for a while. I had it turned around with the image facing out to take a look at it, and then I ran out of room, so it had to get in line. So again, same thing here. We've got our spines that we're used to seeing here. You can see them line up nicely next to each other. So lots of work by Brian Michael Bendis. Alex Maleev is also in here. Matt Hollingsworth, Dave Stewart. There's a lot of different creators that kind of pop in and out of here depending on the issue. And a couple things I want to point out about this one for you Daredevil Omni collectors. This is kind of the one spot where the story doesn't keep going. We actually have almost every single Daredevil issue collected from Marvel Knights all the way through the modern era. We're waiting on a Chip Zdarsky omnibus to be announced to kind of keep it going. But almost every single issue is collected. The only thing that is not collected, and you'll see it kind of listed down here, we have Daredevil number 16 through 19, and then number 26 through 50, and then 56 through 60. So those couple arcs there in the middle with issues 20 to 25 and then 51 to 55, they are not collected in here because they were not written by Brian Michael Bendis. Even though he had a long run, there are a couple of spots where they did use other writers. They are collected elsewhere, but they are in out-of-print trade paperbacks, and so you might be able to find those out there if you come across it. So be on the look for those particular issues in trade in case you would like to read all of Daredevil. But again, if you are just reading the Omnis, you're going to get the bulk of the story. You're not really going to feel like you're missing too much, but there are those gaps. And so there are a couple things that kind of happen in between those issues that you're like, wait a minute. But you get caught up pretty quickly. And so it's definitely okay. So you've got, again, the covers kind of all up here. And then this nice shot of Daredevil down here. I believe this is This is Alex Maleev down here, who's again a great artist and does some really, really great work inside of this book. He and Brian Michael Bendis have worked together a lot over the years, and so we've got this nice spines next to each other. And then this one, oh look, Daredevil goes to jail. This is not the last time that we'll see Matt Murdock in handcuffs. Spoiler alert, in case you are not caught up, but this is something that kind of pops up from time to time with Daredevil. And so this one continues that collection. This has Daredevil number 61 through 81, What If Karen Page Had Lived, and Ultimate Marvel Team Up number 6 through 8. And so again, Brian Michael Bendis, one of the seminal runs on Daredevil, which, that's the thing about Daredevil. We've got all these omnis from him, which is, he's not typically an A-list character in the Marvel universe in terms of comics, but he's had some great runs over the years, one of the most consistently well-written characters over the years, and this just keeps it going. Next up, we have Daredevil by Ed Brubaker, Volume 1 and 2. Volume 1 came back into print last year. It should still be available if you're looking for it. I don't know how many copies are left, but I think you can probably find it online right now. Volume 2 has not gotten a reprint and has not had an announcement of a reprint recently. So if you come across it, you may want to go ahead and snag it. It has been out of print for quite a while. So we're getting a lot of Daredevil coming back. We had this. We had the Volume 2 coming, which is not a reprint, but a new one. We had the Frank Miller Omni come, but almost every single Daredevil Omni is out of print right now. And so if you do come across them and it's a fair price, you may want to go ahead and pick it up if you're looking to kind of round out your collection. And so here we've got this issue, this cover from David Finch. And this one, I'm actually not sure who did this one. It looks kind of like Phil Noto maybe, but I'm not sure on that one. I need to take a look at that. And then we've got the spines here. These are some thinner omnis. When you look at some of the Daredevil omnis, they probably could have put these two actually together into one. It would have been a little bit thicker, but not any worse than some other ones. And so we've got our Daredevil spine, Brubaker, Lark, Giordano, and they work typically on all three of them. We've got Volume 1 and Volume 2 down here. So lots of stuff going on here. This is a pretty cool cover. This reminds me of the Phantasm from Batman, the animated series, the Mask of the Phantasm movie. Something that looks really cool. This collects Daredevil number 82 through 105. So we've got the beginning of the Brubaker run here. And then you'll notice on these, I don't have ISBNs on these just because they did not come like that, but that's fine. And then on the back here, we've got these images. On the back, we've got this really cool image of Kingpin fighting here. And then collecting Daredevil 106 to 119 and 500 because the numbering changed again. And then Daredevil Annual number 1 and Daredevil Blood of the Tarantula. And so we've got a lot of really cool stuff going on through here. But this is the entire Ed Brubaker run. There are no breaks in this one. You get the entire thing from his first issue to his last issue. Next, we have Daredevil Shadowland. This was an event that Marvel did that was around Daredevil, so I do not keep this with my Marvel events just because it typically only really affected Daredevil and his world, even though some other Marvel characters kind of come into play. So it wasn't really an MCU-wide event. It really was pretty contained to Daredevil. In terms of this story, you're going to find a lot of differing opinions. Some people really like this story. Some people really don't. Some people really like the main story but don't care for the tie-ins. And I think I probably fall into that camp. I think the main story is great, especially with what they do with the character of Daredevil in this. This is Andy Diggle during his era. And some of the tie-ins are okay, but I really appreciated the core story. This is another Omni that is out of print here, so again, if you find it, you may want to snag it if you're able to get it for a decent price. This has only been printed once, and so it's been out of print for a few years, and so hopefully as we have this resurgence of Daredevil, we're going to get this back into print for everybody that needs it. But you can see we've went with the kind of typical cover right here that you'll see on some other Shadowland Omnis, and here we've got some of the creators here on the side. Andy Diggle and Philip Tan doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this one, and then we have Shadowland down here at the bottom in the small text. I like that consistency across this Omni line here. And then we've got maybe a little bit of a spoiler here. If you're curious about like why is Daredevil with these ninjas and is that the Hand? So if you've not read this, you should check it out. But this is going to contain the Shadowland event as well as all the tie-ins. And so this starts off with Dark Reign, the list, Daredevil number 501 through 512. Shadowland number 1 through 5, Shadowland Elektra number 1, Shadowland Bullseye number 1, Shadowland Ghost Rider number 1, Shadowland Spider-Man number 1, Shadowland After the Fall number 1, Shadowland Moon Knight number 1 through 3, Shadowland Blood on the Streets number 1 through 4, Shadowland Daughters of the Shadow number 1 through 3, Shadowland Power Man number 1 through 4, Thunderbolts number 148 to 149, and Daredevil Reborn number 1 through 4. Again, this continues right out of Ed Brubaker's run, so everything that Bendis does sets up Brubaker, everything that Brubaker does sets up Diggle, and it all just continues to go into these really great stories containing Daredevil. And so you've got a lot in this one. Again, the nice thing about this one, you can kind of decide what you want to read. If you don't like all the tie-ins, after you've read them the first time, you don't have to read them again. You can read the main Shadowland event and the Daredevil tie-in issues and just a couple of other things in here to really get the full story and to be okay. But again, this is one that's due for a reprint, hopefully one day. I know there's a lot of folks, it's kind of funny, there's a lot of folks who don't necessarily care for the story, but they want it to come back in print because they want to complete their Daredevil collections, so this is one to look out for. And next we have Daredevil by Mark Waid, volumes 1 and 2. These have been out of print for quite a while, but if you've not heard the news, this is coming back into print. Finally getting a second printing in right now scheduled for November of 2023, both volume 1 and volume 2. So if you've been waiting for this, it is coming back. And so it starts off with Mark Waid and some various artists and then kind of transitions over to Chris Samney. And then Chris Samney pretty much does most of the art over into volume 2. You can see his artwork here on the main cover for volume 2 there. And I really like this cover between Daredevil and Spider-Man because there is some Spidey issues in this. And that's one of the things I like about Daredevil. You see him and Spider-Man cross paths every once in a while. It's funny. Like there are some times where Daredevil talks about Spider-Man being his best friend. But depending on the era and the timeline that it's in, Spider-Man may or may not know who Daredevil is, even though they consider each other friends. So here we've got the spines again. We've got these two images down here, and we've got the different creators over here. We have volume 1, volume 2 down there on the bottom. And then on the back, we've got this cool image here. We've seen this done in the movies and the TV shows and things like that. We can see all the covers up there. And then we have a listing of what all this contains down at the bottom. And this has Daredevil number 1 through 27, also 10.1, Amazing Spider-Man 677, Avenging Spider-Man number 6, and The Punisher number 10. So we've got a few tie-ins with some other issues happening through here. If you see, this is kind of the typical cover that you can see right there, which I don't know why I'm showing it to you because I can always just put it up on the screen. And so that's one. And then let's take a look at the back of volume 2 here. These do have the ISBNs on them. You can see some more of the collage of the different issues that are happening here. And then this one has Daredevil number 28 through 36, Indestructible Hulk number 9 through 10, Daredevil number 1 through 18 when it was renumbered, 1.50, 0.1, and 15.1. So they did some crazy stuff with the numbering. But you see you've got all the issues through here. This also includes the Daredevil Original Sin tie-in issues. One of the things that was pretty cool through there is just kind of the tie-ins they did with that event and everyone kind of finding out something new about their character, which was pretty neat. And you'll see the numbering does change, so this kind of finishes out that Daredevil run. And then we have number 1 beginning over here. I think this was the all-new, all-different Marvel Now era, and so most everything got renumbered, and so we have Daredevil number 1 again right there before eventually it transitions back to some standard numbering, or at least gives you the legacy numbering through those as well. But this is a great run. I will say it's not my favorite Daredevil era. I know some people really love this run, and it is good, but I love Daredevil in New York. And not to get into spoilers, but Daredevil spends a lot of time in San Francisco in this. And if you know anything about Daredevil, he has spent time in San Francisco before throughout his history, but he's back again in this one. And I really love Daredevil in New York and Hell's Kitchen. I feel like he makes so much sense there that I'm not always a big fan of when he comes out. So that part was always like a little weird for me. But again, Mark Waid is a really phenomenal writer, and so there's a lot of really good stuff going on in here. So make sure you grab these reprints when they drop. They probably will sell out if I had to guess. I don't think they'll be available for super long before they disappear. So make sure you grab them as they drop. And last but not least, we have Daredevil by Charles Soule. This is a fairly thick Omni. I think they could have split this one into two if they were kind of following the methodology they used for the other ones, but I'm glad it's in one. It's a great story that goes together. Again, this flows right out of the Mark Waid run. So now we have, after you get through the Bendis era, into Brubaker, into Diggle with Shadowland, then Mark Waid, then into Charles Soule. We have this whole era all straight through, with the exception of those couple missing issues during the Bendis era that he didn't write. But you can find all of these together. So you really get to read just years and years of Daredevil from beginning to end in just a few Omnis, which is really great. And so here we've got this cover here by Phil Noto, Ron Garney and Phil Noto doing a lot of the artwork on this. We have our spine. Again, this one just saying Omnibus down at the bottom. We've got the creators down here on the side again with our image of Daredevil. I like all the different iterations that we get across the line as we go through the series. And then we get the back issue here. And I noticed this earlier. They've got this tagline here. It says, "Back where he belongs." And, hopefully Mark Waid didn't take a huge offense to this from Charles Soule. But Charles Soule, one of the things he does is he brings him back to New York, back in Hell's Kitchen. And so it's a new era for Daredevil, so to speak. And so while Mark Waid's run is very good, this series, again, I think I really appreciate it being back into Hell's Kitchen, where I like Daredevil. And so this one contains Daredevil number 1 through 28 and 595 through 612 when they switch back to the legacy numbering. Daredevil Annual number 1, Daredevil Punisher 7th Circle number 1 through 4, and material from All New, All Different .1. This one has only had one printing, originally released back in December of 2021. It was in print for a while, but now it is out of print. And so if you are looking for this one, it might be harder to find. Also, since it's more of a recent one, I don't know how long we'll have to wait for a reprint. So I would imagine in terms of priority for a lot of Daredevil collectors out there, this one's probably not as high on the list since it was a more recent printing. So I would hope and see that we get more of like Bendis, the rest of Brubaker, the Frank Miller Companion needs one, and then a lot of people wanting Shadowland, like we talked about. So there's so many options for reprinting Daredevil over the next few years. I think it'll take several years for us to get all of them just because there's so many, and there's a lot of other Omnis to get reprinted as well. But this is the end of the Daredevil Omnis at this point. When Charles Soule wraps this up, the next era for Daredevil is Chip Zdarsky. Right now, you can find those in trade paperback. There are some out-of-print, oversized hardcovers that you can find. And obviously, his run is still going. He's got a new series of Daredevil happening right now that's up to like issue 7 or 8. And so I don't know how long we'll be waiting. It looks like we'll have enough content from Chip Zdarsky to have 2 Omnis from him. Unless it's a really big one and his run ends soon, which I've not heard of his run ending anytime soon. So I don't know if we'll have to wait until his run is finished before we get the first Omni. Hopefully not. I would love for us to just go ahead and get that first one out of the way because it is there's a lot in there to kind of dive into and read, and he has a really, really phenomenal run. I love what Chip Zdarsky is doing with Daredevil, and so hopefully we get to keep him on that book for quite a while. But with that again wraps up all of the Daredevil Omnis. Drop a comment down below. Which ones do you have? Do you have a complete run? Are you still missing some copies here and there? And then what would you do if you had some custom dust jackets? Would you do a similar spine design? Do you like your Silver Age being different? Kind of chime in and let me know what you think. And stay tuned and come back more for content very soon.